Anita Dunn was communications director for President Obama during his first term. She's with me here in New York. Anita, nice to see you again.
Hi, great to see you.
Let me start off by asking you about White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer saying that the White House put out this list to ensure that Americans are reminded about the threat of terrorist attacks. How should we understand that list as part of a communications strategy?
I think Sean Spicer has the toughest job of anybody in the White House, and there isn't such a thing as an easy job in any White House. But Sean has the toughest job because he has a president who communicates on his own every morning, goes into events, goes off script, whose authentic voice leaves Sean explaining afterwards a lot of things that he wasn't planning to have to explain. I think this list is a great example of that. But I think that Sean, who's wearing two hats right now of communications director and press secretary, actually has a third job, which is almost like a President Trump interpreter. And in many ways, that one is the most time consuming. He said this, oh, we better go figure out exactly what he meant. So that's a challenging job, and one that most press secretaries haven't had to deal with.
Yeah, help us understand, Anita, because you were there, you were White House communications director. Help us understand the role of a communications director in a White House versus the role of a press secretary in the White House. And what does it mean that you have one person, Sean Spicer, doing both?
You have one person doing one too many jobs in this case. They are very distinct jobs. The White House press secretary job is one that takes an enormous amount of preparation every day. It's the public face and the public voice of the White House. The communications director is in many ways the sales part of the White House, figuring out how to help communicate around the policies to build support. It's kind of the longer term planning job. So that's a lot of meetings, a lot of coordination, a lot of planning. And if you're getting ready to go talk to reporters, or you're the point person to talk to reporters, then you really shouldn't be in the meetings doing all the planning. And I think the fact that Sean has to wear both hats is it's a huge problem. That job was split several administrations ago for a good reason.
So, Anita, now apparently the White House is reportedly launching a search for a communications director. What do you think about that?
Well, they were supposed to have a communications director at the beginning. The person who initially accepted the job withdrew, I think, 24 hours after he accepted it. So Sean Spicer has been, I think, had both jobs, but there was never any doubt that they were going to need more than one person to do two jobs. He's been trying to do both of them. I think he'd probably appreciate having a communications director in there as well. They need to bring a sense of structure and strategy to their overall communication. They did a very good job in the general election campaign of communicating. They have a president whose voice is able to reach millions of people, and figuring out how to do that effectively to further policies, it's part of the learning curve that you hit in the White House. So it's not surprising, and it's a job they need to fill.
Yeah, well, so your tenure, let me ask you about your own experience, was at the beginning of the Obama administration, your tenure as communications director. And I wonder, does a White House get a second shot at delivering a message?
Yes. I think White Houses get continual resets when they need them. Listen, the beginning of an administration is always rocky. At the beginning of Bill Clinton's administration, for example, their communications operation ended up getting restructured as well. I think there's a certain sort of trial run quality to it. Of course, the stakes are so high, and you're doing it in public view, and it's not always pretty, and it's not always fun.
First impressions can stick, though, sometimes, right?
First impressions
rolling
can
out
stick.
Different policies. If it goes poorly, that can be something that can come back to sort of haunt an administration.
It's very difficult to to be able to come back and roll out a policy again, but you can try. As a matter of fact, some administrations roll out the same policy multiple times, and you do it in multiple ways. The press likes to talk about administrations trying to hit the reset button. Believe me, administrations like to be able to hit that reset button. I think that that first visit into the briefing room that Sean made Saturday after the inauguration is one that administration would like to hit the reset button on several times.
Yeah. So let me ask you about some of the stories that we've been hearing. Infighting stories being leaked about various people perhaps not being necessarily as close to President Trump as other advisors. What do you make of all of this? The fact that there are so many stories of this kind of jockeying, is this just sort of part of the normal process of people posturing and trying to suss out their positions within the Trump administration?
You know, it's unusual that you get this many stories this early. I was in an administration where we jokingly like to call ourselves No Drama Obama. Now, we had plenty of drama. But we didn't have
probably,
yeah, I mean,
some folks probably disagree with
yes,
that. Yeah.
But it was a good branding, if nothing else. We didn't actually play out most of this stuff, though, in the newspapers. I think part of it is because this is a relatively new team in terms of being together. They didn't work together for 2 years throughout the campaign. They didn't form those bonds with each other. And also the sort of relationship with the president where they didn't feel they had to jockey against each other. I think some of it, you know, frankly, is because it is much more fun to cover this kind of thing than really try to figure out what policy is. And so there is definitely a press bias towards these process stories. And then, you know, I think Donald Trump is a very different kind of president. He was a CEO. He'd like to have a lot of different voices around him. And so I think they're working out what's going to work best for this White House. It's not always done quite as publicly.
All right. Anita Dunn, so good to have you on set with us. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks for having me.